All right, hello. We are going to cover how to start up a crowdfunding campaign today, how to figure out what your price points are, what your pledges are, how much money you need to get in to make sure that your project funds, and how much you're to sort of know what your production costs are, mailing costs, all that sort of thing, so you sort of know an estimate at least of what you're going to get out of this crowdfunding. I'm going to preface this with saying I don't run crowdfunding to make money. Um, this is something a lot of people see when they look at crowdfunding and, oh, you've raised $10,000 or $5,000 or $20,000, and you're like, oh, you made a lot of money on that. No, crowdfunding is technically should be to get the money you need for a project. And you want the goals to be as low as they can be so that you fund and it looks good, basically, that you funded a project. But then you also want to make sure you get enough money to actually fund the thing and produce it so that you get it to those backers as the appropriate rewards and you don't nobody has a negative reaction to it. So I basically price my campaigns to come out neutral or maybe a little bit negative because I know I can throw in a little bit of money if I need to. I should step back. I run a small press, Space Wizard Science Fantasy. So I publish books. We have about 50 books out now. So I've been doing this for running a publishing company since 2021. I've been publishing books since about 2016. So I have a very good idea of pricing estimates, how books work, how they get published. I'm also trained as an analyst and a mechanical engineer, so I've been doing cost benefit analysis for I don't know 20 years. Uh, so as with everything, I have a spreadsheet. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to basically go down the spreadsheet, show you how it works. I will have probably a link to a download for the spreadsheet for a template in case you want to get one. And then may bring up one of my own campaigns that I'm going to be doing in the near future. So let's start with the template. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So there's a lot of different stuff in here. We're going to go over it. It should be fairly easy to understand if you have any sort of familiarity with Excel or Google Sheets or anything like that. Um, I'll try to sort of go on the basic side and try to cover anything that if you're not as familiar with Excel, what you would need to do for this. So I've put in, there's some lines in here and instructions. If you want to download this template, just delete these out so you can sort of see the whole thing. But I've also color coded it, number of instructions, and where they go throughout the spreadsheet. So what we're going to do is we have a campaign. You want to produce a thing, right? Be it book or plushie or pin or whatever you're doing, new gadget. Um, so you've got to determine what your base cost is to produce the thing. What does it take? If you take the case of a book, right? Because that's what I do. So you need a cover, you need editing, you need an ISBN, you need production costs. Basically, you need to figure out what all this stuff is. So before you even approach this spreadsheet, do your research. Find out what you need to do to produce the thing you're trying to produce. All it takes is a little research. Look up some production costs. They don't have to be final. All this is estimates, but you want them to be as close as possible to actual estimates. So with that said, um, step one, determine your base costs and the cool things you want to do with the money, right? So base cost in here. So these are all, you can see up here, these are all basically spaces you can put in money. So I'm going to say, let's take the example of a book. Doyle is helping out up here. I have another cat in my lap, by the way. But so base cost, we're going to say it's $1,000 to produce a book because you want a really nice cover. And this is something you can do with crowdfunding is you can get a little bit more expensive than if you were saying put a book out yourself. You might have to go with a cheaper cover or something like that. So we have a good estimate of what it takes. In this case, I'm going to say cover. Maybe you have some editing on it, hopefully, and formatting, something like that. Comes to $1,000. So this is our base cost for the book. Now, past that, what do you do if you get that funded? So because a lot of campaigns fund, and then they will continue to gather funds past that point. So what are your stretch goals? And I have this template has a list of 9 stretch goals. I have never hit that many on a campaign. So you should have plenty of room to play around here, unless they're really, really small stretch goals. I personally tend to have significant milestones as my stretch goals. So let's say base cost, cover, whatever. Your stretch goal 1 is going to be, I'm gonna get a better editor, some developmental and copy editing for this to make sure it's a really good quality book. And that's gonna cost another $1,000. These are just round numbers. Don't take this as actual cost for your book. Go do your own research on how much this is gonna cost. But we're just gonna play around these numbers. Then we're gonna have another stretch goal. We say, hey, if people really like this, we're gonna make a hardback book as well as a paperback book. And again, do your research for this. Different styles of book production is costly. Hardbacks are expensive. Go look at, before you start your campaign, what possible producers you're going to go with for this. Ingram, Amazon, Lulu. There's a whole bunch of custom hardback creators. So go do your research, find out how much you think it is going to cost. You're going to need how many books you think you're going to produce and what the cost is, plus what features you want in your hardback. So something like for these stretch goals, this is what you need to figure out. We got another stretch goal, which is an audiobook. People love audiobooks. So in this case, if you're not familiar, audiobooks are generally based on per hour finished, which is what the narrator will charge. So you need to figure out about how long your book's going to be, how many hours it's going to be recorded, get a cost for a couple narrators, find out what that is. So you put in your stretch goal. And then we're going to give another stretch goal here for a marketing budget. At that point, we're getting more money. We've done pretty well on this campaign. So at that point, we're going to see if we can get some extra money for actually selling the book. So this is just the first step. So we put together base costs for what we want to do with this campaign. We've done our research, we've figured out how much they are, and you put these numbers in. Now, this doesn't tell you how much you need in your campaign. This is telling you how much this costs you to create. Remember, when you have a crowdfunded campaign, the actual cost that you raise in crowdfunding is going to include the base cost to do what you want, plus the production costs of giving those things to the people who backed your campaign. So those have to be included as well. And that's what the rest of the spreadsheet is going to work with. Okay. Let's move on to the second one. Determine a good array of pledge levels. So this is what people are going to be doing to back your campaign. You should have a good range of pledge levels. Don't short sell yourself. You would be surprised what people will actually pay for a good product. So don't put your costs too low, put them reasonable for what you want to get out of it. And you will also want to have a nice big range. For example, I usually have like a $1 one that's just, hey, I'm looking at this campaign. I call it keeping an eye on things. You get your names in the acknowledgments for the book. It's just sort of a whatever. I usually get a few of these. However, this is also a good category that if somebody wants to donate money to your campaign, which I have had happen, they could do this and just put in, $100 or $200. They don't want to get anything out, but they want to give you money. This is a good level for that to happen. And then I have some other levels, so I'll go down this list. So for example, ebooks. Again, talking about the example of a book. So ebook, all my ebooks are $5. That's really easy. This one doesn't have any production costs because it's just an ebook. Once I get it ready, I can send it out. So this one's a really easy one. All this money is basically coming in and I'm keeping it. 2 ebooks, that's a $10 reward. A paperback, I generally charge about $20 for paperbacks. 20, 25, something like that is good. Maybe 15 if it's a really, novella length, shorter book. But price that, look at different production companies, again, Amazon, Ingram, Lulu, whatever, to see what it's going to cost. And you want to mark up on there so you actually make money. So here's where this next column, which is going to be number 3 up here, what is your cost to produce this? I'm going to sort of blend these two. So this is where you also want to put in your cost to produce this. So once I start producing a paperback, I'm looking at how much it costs. Now I've produced a lot of paperbacks. I know how much it costs. I have 850 in here. Usually your book, reasonable length book that's not like 500 pages, anywhere from like 100 to 400 pages is gonna be $5, $6 to actually produce, maybe $7, something like that, to actually produce. However, your books have to be shipped to you. So this is including shipping costs, production costs, taxes, all that sort of stuff. Get an estimate for a book of about the length that you think you will need. Put that in for your cost. So here I have one paperback for $20. Cost me $8.50 to do that. So my profit is actually $11.50 on this $20 reward tier, whereas I'm getting $10 on the $10 reward tier because those are ebooks. These are things to be careful of when you're putting together your production costs, because some things get you a lot more money than other things. So expanding this again, 2 paperbacks. Maybe you have 2 books you're doing, $40. Just basically add everything together. This is literally 8.5 times 2. And then our profit there is a little bit more for that. So you can go from there and try to flesh out your rewards. For instance, here I have 5 ebooks. I run a production company, so it's very easy for me to put my back catalog in there. If you have other things that you have made before, make them available in your campaign. So you can get 5 ebooks from me for $25. This is really popular. A lot of people like to do this. It's an electronic reward. It's easy. They get a ton of books to read very quickly. So something like this, $25, and I get all that. That's perfect. Then you can have some other cool stuff like the hardback I mentioned before. This is going to be a little bit more pricey. It also costs a little bit more to produce. So your profit may be more or less on that depending. Past that, you start to get into the high level tiers. So what I call them. Past about $40, $50 is where people actually have to think to say, do I want to put this much into the campaign? The one to $20 to $40 is sort of like, yeah, okay, I'll support this campaign. Past that point, I'm just calling this cool high level tier, $80. In my case, I can say like, hey, um, I don't know, here's a book and a poster and a keychain and something that goes all together. So if you have a bunch of different rewards, this is where to have a package where somebody can say, I want to go all in, get the package with the pin, with the poster, with the bookmark and the keychain and whatever you're putting out with your product. This is where you can put in extra fun stuff. Again, you have to understand how much they cost to produce. So for your cost, again, figure this out. You have to go do your research, go to the different companies that might produce this product, figure out the cost, and put that in this. Okay, I have something like 5 paperbacks, which goes along with my 5 ebooks. Same thing there. Of course, it has some more costs for it. So again, looking at this, my 5 ebooks, I get $25 from it. My 5 paperbacks, I get $50 from it, even though the reward is 4 times as much, or the level is 4 times as much. Okay, going on from there, you have some really, really high level stuff. If you have some personalized art or a signed copy, or you do an edit for somebody, or you do a critique reading, or be creative, figure out what sort of high level tiers you can get that will cost a lot of money and preferably get you a lot of money too. Because don't commission a sculpture that's going to cost $300 and then sell it for $400 because you're only getting $100, from that plus whatever shipping and it can work, but be careful of high level tiers that cost you a lot to produce a really cool thing, because then you're not actually getting much more than you are from the low level tiers. And you want these high level tiers to get you a lot of money. These are the ones that are going to fund the cool stretch goals in your campaign. So, some examples here, like I have a publishing company, so I offer copy editing and developmental editing for high tier rewards. Those are electronic, so it doesn't really cost me anything except time to actually do it. But in my cost, I can put 0, so it funds the campaign a lot. Try to think out of the box how you can make up these high level tiers that get you a lot of money, and those are going to really help fund your campaign. Okay. So as I said, I sort of combine these number 2 and number 3. Figure out your pledges, have a good list of pledges. Anything from 3 to 5 is good. I tend to go a little bit heavy on my campaigns, especially with putting 4 or 5 high level tiers in there. Um, I always think people are going to get confused by it. Usually people don't. So I think it's all right if you have like 8 to 10 tiers of pledges. If you're new at this, I would probably recommend staying lower, maybe 5 tiers. Really depends on what you have to offer and what other cool stuff you have along with the primary thing that you're putting out that is in this. All right. So once you've determined your pledge levels and you determined your cost to produce them, put all this stuff in here. So in this template spreadsheet, I've also got a shipping cost in here. This is good to have. This is not factored in whether you're doing Kickstarter or backer kit, generally not factored in nowadays. It used to be when I started, you actually had to factor in the shipping cost as well, which is why I have this column in here. It's still good to know, but this is, I have a note in here, the shipping costs are not added in to your total campaign cost. This is usually something that's added later in the pledge manager, especially with backer kit. Kickstarter is doing this as well. So it's good and the bad. I don't like that your backers aren't really seeing the whole cost. However, you do also give them a warning of this is generally how much shipping costs. There's a whole other discussion about where you ship. You know, if you're US, are you shipping only to US? Or are you shipping to the world? That's not in the spreadsheet. But do your research on that to figure out where you're shipping in the world and what those costs are. Again, you could put them in here as placeholders. They don't actually affect the outcome of the sheet. All right, so the profit, if you're familiar with Excel, this is just a formula. I'm just taking the difference here to figure out what the profit is. This is, I think, about right. I haven't looked in the past year or so, but this is the fee. So BackerKit takes a fee for running your campaign. And this, basically, don't touch these numbers. They're generally about right. I think I based this on Kickstarter. BackerKit is about the same. I've run several campaigns on either, and this is a good enough estimate of what your fee is. So this is going to be calculated out for each campaign or for each level and how much it costs. It's going to be a representative fee for that amount of pledge level. Okay, so we've done 1, 2, and 3. Now comes the fun part. At least I think it's the fun part. Play around with your numbers. So this is where you are now going to see how much people need to back of what level for my campaign to fund. So for each one over here, keeping an eye on things. And again, I said this is a good bucket for donations. I generally put like my excess stuff in here, so you can change this to 200 or 300 if you think you have a lot of add-ons or something like that that people are gonna pick up for your campaign. So that's generally sort of a dump level, so you can, if you want to put some random extra in your campaign, this is a good place to do it. Aside from that, put in how many backers you think are going to back that level in your campaign. Keeping in mind, more people will back smaller levels than larger levels. So when you do this, let me turn this back again so it doesn't, let me do this. So if I set these out to zeros, so you're going to see these numbers change down here. What you want to do with this is you want your profit to be about 0. Again, remember when I say you're not making a lot of money in crowdfunding. You are doing this generally to break even. Save making money for the higher tiers. For base cost, you just want to break even on this campaign. This is how you set your base cost as low as you possibly can so that you hit it faster. And you can even take a loss on that for your first goal if you're pretty confident you're going to hit the campaign, or you just don't really have enough backers and you want them to back part of your product, but you could put in a little extra money. So this is where you can play around with the profit. So for right now, this is calculating, this is coming from my total base cost, which I put in up here. My expenses, this big long formula up here, is basically I'm taking each of my costs times how many backers are in there, adding it all together. So I see my base cost is $1,000. My expenses, based on this number of backers, is over $1,000. This is the total pledges times the backers. So I'm actually only making 570 on this, so this is way off right now. This is not breaking even. And then I have the fee calculated in there, which is take the fee times the number of backers. All that adds up to your total profit, which is your expense. I have 37. Yeah, your total minus your fee minus your expenses. So your total here, you're only making 570. You're subtracting 1,000 plus 54, so you're like minus $600 on this. So if you start adding more people here, say add 5, you note the profit starts going down. So if you watch that profit number as I start adding in, 5 backers on each level, suddenly this starts becoming profitable. What you want to do with the spreadsheet is try to make this around 0 with reasonable number of backers. And this will give you your total number of backers here. So for this one, I say, just to break even on this campaign, remember this is $1,000 for a book for basic production costs. I have $100 of more or less donations or add-ons or something like that. I have 10 people backing an ebook. I have 5 people backing 2 ebooks. I have 5 people backing a paperback. This would probably be lower. This would probably be like 2 or 3 because less people are going to back 2 paperbacks than 1 paperback. Think of that sort of logic. 5 ebooks. Realistically, again, I said your lower numbers are going to have more backers. Your higher numbers are going to have fewer backers. So let's change this. Let's say this is 8. I'm going to try to mess with this and make sure I'm still profitable. So let's do this. Let's do 10, 5, 2 paperbacks. We're going to have like 2, 5 ebooks. We're going to have, yeah, like 3. We're going to say like 2 people got the hardback. 3 people got your first high level tier. 1 person got 5 paperbacks that was, a family member who really wanted to support you. We have somebody who backed a cool high level tier. At this point, we're still like $100 down. So we can add in, maybe 7 people have gotten my paperbacks. Okay, well that puts me, a little bit closer. Maybe we say 15 people get the ebooks. Another caveat for this, as you run these numbers and sort of figure out what's profitable, your final campaign will be different than these numbers. I have never been able to peg exactly what people are going to back on a campaign. It's always different every time. So what I will actually do during the campaign is I will make a copy of this page and put an actual number of backers as the campaign runs to sort of figure out what's going on. This sheet can also be used for that. So that's really good use of this. But for now, so let's see, I'm down $100 here. So let's do, I changed the wrong one. Okay, let's do this. So like 15, 1 ebooks, 10, 2 ebooks. Let's say move this up to 10. That'll probably make it, it's $100 down. Let's do this. Okay. About $40 down. That's decent. Let's get in like 3 more ebooks. $25. Okay. You could leave this as a more or less break even on your base campaign. You have 73 backers, most of them are backing the lower tiers, and then you have a couple people who backed higher stuff. Now, let's look at what the actual goal for the campaign is. Remember, I said you have to take your production costs into account. So you have $1,000 for your base goal. Now we're seeing it's profitable with your total minus your expenses, minus your fees. You're basically around 0. What this does here is it just rounds your total number to the nearest, I think, 5. Yeah. So for all of these, you check out this is what the actual number is, this yellow one. And then you set this, so you could set it for like 1520. It's good to use like nice whole numbers, so 1500. What this does is it tells you what your actual goal pledge level or your actual goal for the campaign is. So in this case, we have $1,000 to produce the book. You need to ask for 1,500 on your campaign to fund that. So it always comes out a bit surprising to me how much extra it is for a crowdfunding campaign to actually produce a product at a break-even point. Remember, this isn't even making any money on this. You need to ask for $1,500 to produce a $1,000 book, and you're not going to make any money. So this is why the spreadsheet is really, really helpful because it tells you about what to expect. So you go through that same process on all of your goals. So I've done this on the spreadsheet to sort of generally break even here. So we played around it, and that's step 5, adjust the goal for your campaign goals. So that's going to fill in this line here, and this will tell you you can start out your campaign with saying what your stretch goals are going to be. I usually list 2 or 3 to get people excited about that after the base goal has been funded. So that's basically all you do with this. What I generally do, you notice I have these labeled here. So this is just the number of stretch goals marching on, toward the end. I have all 9 stretch goals here for your 9 stretch goals here. Each of these numbers at the end is going to be linked to these guys up here. So these are just pulling directly from these numbers. So as I create these, what I generally do is say, this one's good, it's about 0. Just take this whole thing, copy it, paste it on the next one. Now you have well, in this case, your first stretch goal. This base goal adds in both of these now. You have your base cover plus you want your more editing stretch goal. Same thing. And, add in your number of backers to figure out, like if you, this also is a good estimate to do this when you just start. So if you copy that and paste it over to your first stretch goal, you can see the difference. So if you break even on this, having your next goal means you're now $1,000 in profit or down in profit. So anyway, what I had in here was actually not that many more backers. This is where you can have a couple, sneak in some things like, hey, maybe somebody backed one of my high level things between my base goal and my stretch goal, and that'll be a nice bonus of money. Or maybe you plug in, $300 or $400 here if you have some really cool add-ons that people are going to buy, or somebody made a donation to your campaign, something like that. So once you're past the base goal, this is where different things start to open up generally as you run your campaign. So again, just work with this profit, try to get it about 0. Here I have it, negative $30, something like that. I found if you operate on a slight loss, you can get these numbers looking a little bit better. Like this one is 1,500. It says it's about 1,520. This one says I'm aiming, my actual costs are about 3,200. I set the goal at 3,000. So now I'm basically 200 down. This next line is telling me what my actual cost or minus is going to be if I meet that goal based on the goal I set here based on my expenses. So this says if I meet that goal, I'm technically about $15 down. This one says, so I meet this goal, I'm technically about $170 down. If I set this at 3,000 and my actual cost is 3,180. So again, you want to make these nice round numbers that people are going to appreciate. Do 500s or 50s or something like that. Don't say a stretch goal is like 3125. It's not as appealing to backers. So as you go across here, once you get to higher stretch goals, this is where you could play around it a bit, and this is where you could potentially make a little bit more money. As you go across, you can start adding in some of these higher goals. So you see I have like one here of this cool, really high, $950 level tier. It cost me $400. I get a, chunk of $500 out. So maybe somebody gets one of those finally. Once you get to like stretch goal 2 or 3, you may actually make some money on this, depending on what's happening. This will also depend on how far those stretch goals are apart from each other. Like I said, I tend to use slightly larger milestones because I'm, again, producing books, and a lot of it's like I'll pay my writers more, or I'll get a hardback, or I'll do an audiobook or something, which are fairly large, thousands of dollars for a stretch goal. If you're doing something a lot smaller, like, I'm adding illustrations that's $200 to my book, like this, it's going to be a lot easier to hit that goal. So you don't need to add as many backers in between the two. That also means your unlocking stretch goal is going to be a lot closer. So depending on what you want to do with it, if you have larger spaces, that's an opportunity for you to make a little money on your campaign before you hit another stretch goal. So in this case, let me give you an example. Um, so stretch goal 3 here. I've set this as minus $10. Now let's say I get over this, which my stretch goal 4 is my marketing budget, which is sort of I asked for 1,500. Anything I get there is good because it means I can spend money on my books. So some of these stretch goals can also be sort of floating. If you set it a little higher, for example, my stretch goal 4 is marketing. If I get most of the way there, you can copy stretch goal 4 and put it on stretch goal 3. Now this says, hey, I'm actually making $1,500 profit on this. If and maybe take it back a little bit, so, I don't know, turn this to 300 or something. So I don't quite hit that next goal. If I don't hit it in the campaign, oh well, but also if you've gone over previous stretch goal, you are starting to make a little bit of money. So this sort of in between your stretch goals is where you have a chance to make a little bit more on your campaign. Again, aim for about break even. But stuff like that, if you have a marketing budget or I don't know, something where it's or you want to pay yourself. I've had levels in the campaign where I pay myself, so that's where you could sort of get a get a little bit of money, and it's a little bit more flexible in your goal. Or if you have a conservative estimate on your audiobook, say this was 3,000 instead of 2,600, but you know that you have a favorite audiobook narrator that's not going to charge you quite that much. So it's a chance to make a little bit extra money in your campaign. All right. So that's most of the specifics of this spreadsheet. I have some other fun stuff below. I say fun if you're like me and an analyst. Um, this is the totals for the shipping costs in here. So this will give you an idea of basically what you're going to have to pay to ship this out, but this also should be what's covered later on when you're fulfilling your pledges. Don't worry about this right now, but this will give you an idea of what's going to be covered in the shipping later on. This is some other statistics I put together. This again is your sort of base cost. This is the same number as up here. This is the difference between what you are going to get on the campaign and what you are asking for, or what your cost for production is. So this is saying it basically takes $400 extra of pledges for you to produce a $1,000 book. This is, if you have your stretch goal of more editing, now you basically have to make an extra $1,000 to break even on that. This is what this is saying going through here. So this number is going to continue to go up as you hit higher stretch goals. Shipping costs, this is basically the difference in shipping costs from your base goal. You have your number of fees, and all this goes together. These are a couple different graphs that I put together sort of at different places along the stretch goals. You can copy this chart exactly and stick it in your campaign page. This is where the money is going, production costs, book purchasing, shipping costs, backer kit fees, change as needed based on what you are producing. But this is a nice little easy breakdown to do, already set in there. That comes from this page. So this is another bonus of mapping everything out beforehand, because then you have a nice chart to tell your backers of what's happening. And it also gives a little bit of clarity where people say, hey, you've made $10,000 on this. You've made a lot of money, when you say, no, actually, I haven't. This is where all the cost is coming from. So these are good to have as a sort of moment of honesty in your campaign. Good to put. I usually put these down at the end along with, this is how much stuff generally costs to ship, which is always a big extra part of the campaign. All right, so that pretty much covers everything. If there's any questions or anything like this, I'm happy to talk more about it. I've done many campaigns. I generally use this spreadsheet to figure out everything beforehand. As I said, I will make a copy of this and put everything in afterwards, as the campaign is running as a real-time budget. So real quick, I'm going to switch over to this is actually the estimated budget I'm using for the September 2025 Printopia campaign. Now, this is for me producing an anthology with 21 authors in it. This is a sequel to an anthology we did last year about this time. So I know what the production costs on this are very, very well because I did this last year. So this example is exactly what you just saw. Spreadsheet. It doesn't have all the fancy colors in it. But this is my paying my writers, producing my cover, and producing my book is $5,300. Anthologies are expensive to produce. And you'll notice this doesn't line up with what I said. So I'm actually taking a quite a bit of loss on my base goal for this. I'm down like $3,000 just to fund the base campaign because I'm pretty sure I'm going to get much more than that. This is where I said as you get to later stretch goals, you can start playing around with it and make a little bit extra money. I wanted to show this off because there's a specific thing in here that I wanted to show. There's a little bit more math. I'm happy to talk with people about it later on an individual basis. This is a good thing to contact me about. I'll put my website in there. I have an email contact if anybody wants to get in contact with me about this. But fancy hardback. So this pertains to anything that you are doing something more with the campaign as it progresses. So real quick, so I have my base cost for the anthology. I'm going to pay my writers more when I get a stretch goal. I'm going to get illustrations in the anthology when I get another stretch goal. I'm going to pay more authors, more stuff. Then I'm going to have a fancy hardback option. So one of my pledge levels here is a hardback. Great. Once I hit this goal, my fourth stretch goal here, I'm going to make a hardback that has more features, which means it's going to cost me more. So this is actually calculated by the people who are backing the levels that have hardbacks times this is the difference in production costs from estimated for this fancy version of the hardback versus my regular version. One's $32.50 for the fancy version, one's $12.50 for the non-fancy version. So this is why I'm showing this off because this is something more complex that you could do with your campaigns if you're more familiar with Excel. So I'm saying now that I've hit this goal, I have to take what people have backed this regular hardback. What is the upcharge for the fancy hardback that I'm going to be eating as I fund this campaign? This is why I say this $800 is just the cost for the stretch goal to enable me to produce those hardbacks at a higher level. Now, what this means is if I hit other stretch goals after that, I need to include the difference from people continuing to back hardbacks, and they're probably going to back more now that we know we're getting a fancy version of it. So all this stuff out here is sort of a custom thing I've put together where this is the cost for it. This is the difference in cost for each next stretch goal that I hit. So for me so this 1100 here is actually the cost for the next stretch goal based on how many people I think are going to back the campaign at that level, how much extra it's going to take me to produce that hardback. So you can see some of the calculations here get more advanced as you get more fun stuff. So just keep that in mind if you have an item like this where you're going to make it fancier if you hit a certain stretch goal, make sure you keep in mind how many people are going to back that fancier version that's going to cost you more to produce. So you may need to have some more math in here to figure out what extra that's going to cost. Because otherwise you can see like this is going to cost me increasingly more to produce these hardbacks as the campaign goes on, and don't want to put yourself in the hole by, $2,000 because you thought this was going to be the same production cost as it was originally, but you're actually upping the production cost by quite a bit. So that's one other thing I wanted to cover. And you can see for this campaign, I'll let you in on a secret here. If you look at my actual costs versus what it really costs, I don't actually break even on this until I get to that fancy hardback goal. So this is what I'm aiming for this campaign. This is where I actually am starting to break even. My base goal, I'm not. So if you have done some more crowdfunding campaigns, if you're more confident with how you can raise money, or you know that you have a certain number of people who are going to back it, this is where you can play it around with it a little bit to lower your cost when you start and assume that you're going to break even because you're going to pass a couple stretch goals. This is more advanced. I wouldn't do this if this is your first campaign. If this is your first campaign, use this template. Figure out where your break evens are. Go for that. Have some very easy to reach stretch goals. Don't anticipate you will hit any of your stretch goals. Always anticipate you're going to sort of get to the base level. If you've done a couple crowdfunding campaigns, you can start to stretch this out a little bit. All right. I think I have covered most everything I need. And as I said, you can reach me by going to spacewizardsciencefantasy.com. That is um, my small press. I have contact information there. If you see anything in this video that you want to talk to me about, I have contact information there. Feel free to reach out about this video and any questions in this. I will also put a link to where this spreadsheet is stored on Google Sheets, and you can access it there, play around with it, and see if you have any questions on it. All right. Hope that helped, and best of luck with your crowdfunding endeavors. Use this, please, and this will help you not not promise more than you could deliver on your crowdfunding campaigns. All right, that's it for now.